Okay, welcome everyone. We will be getting started in 1 minute as attendees are just joining now. Welcome to everyone just joining. We'll be getting started in about 30 seconds. Okay, we can get started. Cheryl, please take it away.
Thank you. Welcome to the Caribbean Climate-Smart Accelerators Investor Forum under the theme Blue Economy in the Caribbean. I'm your host, Cheryl Senhouse, Finance Innovation Director with CCSA. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for this webinar, and also for joining us on the live stream of this event on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. We encourage your participation and engagement throughout the session, and here's a quick overview of our audience participation guidelines. Please introduce yourself in the chat only once, and you may include your social media and website links when you do that introduction. Please go ahead and pose your questions to speakers and panelists in the Q&A box throughout the session, and we'll have a short Q&A session towards the end of the event. Please remember to leave recordings in the chat, and go ahead and share the link of the webinar with your colleagues and friends while the session is ongoing. Please stay with us right through to the end of the session if you want to connect with our speakers, as we will be sharing their contact information in the chat at the end of the session. Here at the Accelerator, we work across a coalition of 28 countries throughout the Caribbean. And we're focused on achieving a mandate of developing the world's first climate-smart zone within the region. And we do that by collaborating, convening, and matchmaking to accelerate the pace of climate action. We take another step to deliver on that mandate today by bringing climate-smart projects together with our panel of investors with the aim of establishing and leveraging relationships and stimulating further investment activity. This is the third iteration of our event. Our first investor forum in December of last year featured private sector projects as well as public sector-led or facilitated projects at country level and also at regional level. Project themes included climate-smart agriculture, renewable energy, blue economy, nature-based solutions, and physical and economic resilience. For our second forum, we partnered with the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, our strategic partner, once again taking a multi-sectoral approach to promoting country-level and multi-country projects from its members. Overall, across the two events so far, we promoted 28 projects worth approximately $642 million US, and our finance experts were as wide and varied as Republic Bank regionally, Credit Suisse internationally, convergent financial experts in blended finance structures, the Intrinsic Exchange Group, who were focused on nature-based solutions. And then we also had innovations coming from Blockchain Triangle, Cross-Boundary, Total Energies, and in the finance space, again, Beacon Impact with their impact funds. We also welcome back to the forum Eco Advisors and Harry Balasubramanian and Invert Inc. with Andre Fernandez. What have our results been to date? So far, we partnered 7 projects valued at approximately US $125 million with investors for both project support and financing. This time around, we've narrowed our focus to the blue economy. And while we've honed in on this subsector, we've once again curated a diverse panel of investors and a batch of projects fully representative of the diverse subsectors that make up the blue economy. But what is the blue economy? And why is it important to manage the development of traditional and emergent economic activities in a sustainable way? How can we finance that development? And how do we safeguard our natural resources? We're going to delve into these questions throughout our forum, hearing from our presenters, investors, and project owners on how we can leverage resources, technology, and blue finance to achieve sustainable outcomes for the region. First, though, let me highlight some notable innovations and developments in the blue finance space from right here in the region. The first being the Belize Blue Bond, the second and largest debt for nature swap to date. It was supported by the Nature Conservancy, and the Belize replaced US $553 million of debt with US $364 million of blue bonds. The transaction was underwritten by Credit Suisse, who we featured in our first investor forum, and it was also insured by the International Development Finance Corporation. They insured the loan to have a low interest rate, a 10-year grace period, during which time no principal is paid, and a long maturity of 19 years. In return, Belize agreed to spend about $4 million annually on marine conservation until 2041. It will double its marine protection parks, which include coral reefs, mangroves, and the seagrasses, from 16% of its oceans to 30% by 2026. An endowment fund of US $23.5 million will also finance conservation after 2040. Following on from this, Barbados recently announced in July 2022 that in conjunction with the Nature Conservancy, it is currently exploring a marine debt for nature swap and pursuing the establishment of a $150 million conservation fund with the support of TNC and IDB. Bermuda also continues to lead in creating robust climate action. It announced in August of this year that it is advancing efforts to finalize the Blue Prosperity Plan, aimed at positioning Bermuda to become a global leader and a hub for investment in sustainable industries. Bermuda's plan outlines a pathway for growing its ocean economy while protecting and restoring the island's ocean spaces for present and future generations. It uses two components: the Blue Economy Strategy for growing Bermuda's ocean-related industries and attracting investment opportunities, and the Marine Spatial Plan, a framework for implementing sustainable ocean development, protection, and management. The plan also proposes the development of a blue investment facility, which would attract and manage investments and provide new revenues and career opportunities for Bermudians. Through our activities this morning, we hope to build on these commitments and actions across the region. We want to leverage and protect our natural resources across the region and stimulate further innovations in industry, conservation, and finance for the blue economy. To start our program, we're going to drill down a bit on the blue economy, and we're going to have some context being provided to set the stage for the project presentations and discussions with our investors. We want to welcome at this stage Dr. Angus Friday, an accomplished blue economy leader and practitioner. And Dr. Friday was also instrumental in helping Caribbean governments to establish the Caribbean Climate-Smart Accelerator. Angus, over to you.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. It's a great pleasure to be speaking to you all today on the subject of the blue economy, particularly blue economy in the Caribbean region. There are 5 areas that I'd like to touch on. One is the blue economy and its subsectors. We'd like to talk about some of the links with climate, implications for resilience and livelihoods in the Caribbean, areas of innovation, and areas for consideration for the future in the region. So let me begin by saying a few words about the Waite Institute. At the Waite Institute, we're focused on the 30 by 30 objective. That means 30% of oceans protected by the year 2030. We help governments with the legislation, the policies, etc., to make that happen. We have a number of teams that work on legal, marine spatial planning and marine protected areas, sustainable fisheries, of course, the Blue Economy team, and communications, and others at the Waite Institute, all supporting governments as they move towards this objective. At the Waite Institute, we believe that marine spatial planning and marine protection are really the foundations of the blue economy. And we believe this because 70% of the world's ocean economy actually relies on a healthy ocean. And this is by some work done by WWF and the Boston Consulting Group. And so it's very important, however, that we distinguish between the ocean economy and the blue economy. So what is the blue economy and what are some of the related subsectors? When we say blue economy, we're talking about the part of the ocean economy that contributes to natural capital, either the conservation or the enhancement of natural capital. So there are many definitions around the blue economy. For us, the key part of it is the natural capital, which actually then gives rise to so many of the other economic activities. And the ocean, of course, contains 90% of the world's, over 90% of the world's biosphere. And we believe that it's important to protect that and to actually help it grow. Now, in 2016, there's an estimate done for the global ocean economy of about 1.5 trillion. And the World Bank actually did another estimate specifically for the Caribbean at about 407 billion as of 2012. The people often ask about the key difference between the ocean economy and the blue economy. And to give an example of that. So shipping, of course, is a big part of the ocean economy. But depending on whose definition you use, you may not necessarily include shipping. However, there are technologies such as technologies that actually make shipping healthier for the biosphere. So things like filtration systems, for example, that reduce invasive species, or renewable energy that make ships more efficient, reduces greenhouse gas emissions, and so on. You know, these technologies can be considered part of the blue economy because of the positive impact that they're having on the biosphere. So some of the key subsectors, therefore, marine spatial planning. This is actually an economic activity that's exportable, and the development of nearshore and offshore marine protected areas. We see these two as being essential and the foundations for a blue economy for the reasons that we've alluded to before. Other subsectors include things like coastal resilience, especially where ecosystems are part of that. Insurance, and we'll say more on that later. Financial services that support the blue economy. Digital technologies, for example, that track the influx of sargassum to warn the tourism sector what's happening, or other technologies that keep track of vessels using our exclusive economic zones. Ocean-related educational service are also quite important. It's an area we need to give increasing attention to. Already we see educational services in the Caribbean, certainly in the medical sectors being important. In Grenada, it contributes about 20% to the GDP because Grenada actually trains 1 in every 100 doctors practicing in the United States. And we have medical educational services throughout the region. This is an important export, and so too, marine biology educational services can be an important export for the region. Coastal related healthcare services such as medical tourism can be a huge growth area for the region. Sustainable coastal and marine tourism, obviously important. Blue biotechnology is an important subsector. Thousands of new chemical entities actually come from the oceans, and this includes anti-cancer drugs. And there's a very good reason for this. A lot of the organisms that are stuck to rocks, they need to have important biochemical defense mechanisms and so on. So, and of course, we have a lot of this in the region that can be looked into. Ocean renewable energy, very important, particularly ocean wind. Tidal waves still coming along. We need to have the right material science to deal with the corrosion problem. Sustainable aquaculture. Aquaculture has many, many benefits, including reducing pressures on natural natural fish stocks, but there are a range of challenges that go along with that. And so technologies that help to reduce that ecological risk profile of aquaculture is also very much needed. Sustainable fisheries, very much needed. Marine services, and there are a whole range of that throughout the region and around the world. Sustainable shipbuilding and shipping technologies, we've already mentioned. Ocean plastic recycling and ocean economy. Now, depending on who you talk to, people may have other sectors that they include. The European Commission includes seabed mining. We do not at the Waite Institute. We think that more work needs to be done to understand the full impacts of this on the biosphere. Now, how does the development of these sectors actually contribute towards climate action? Well, let's start with a foundation fact here, and that is that the ocean and the climate are inextricably linked. Ocean sequesters approximately 25% of the carbon cycle, but this cannot be relied upon ad infinitum. As the oceans sequester more carbon, they become more acidic. And this has this is a real danger, of course, for entire ecosystems. And there's real concern in the scientific community that if carbon emissions remain unchecked, we can have collapse of entire marine ecosystems. At the same time, oceans can be part of the solution. If we start with mitigation, we've already talked about renewable energy, but mangrove and seagrasses on a per hectare basis, depending on whom you read, can sequester about 10 times as much as terrestrial forests. We do need, however, to have the right methodologies and have simpler transactions where local communities can actually benefit from blue carbon opportunities. The biomass plays a key role as well in sequestering. The greening of ocean transportation is also important. In the Pacific, we see that there's an entire program around this to make their shipping fleets a lot more efficient and to have renewable energy play a bigger role. In terms of climate adaptation, well, clearly coastal resilience is vitally important. We see that when we have extreme weather events, storm surges, and so on, we need to have these defenses, hard defenses and soft defenses, which could include mangrove and corals. Now, insurance is also a critical part of the link between oceans and climate, and this is an important opportunity. We see that in the Caribbean with the Caribbean Catastrophic Risk Insurance Facility. This is an important innovation, and we need to have more innovations in the insurance sector where the Caribbean is actually playing an active and leading role in leading on the development of some of these insurance products. So it's very important that we do that. We do not become a bystander, but in the Caribbean, a leadership approach is actually taken. What are the subsectors that are critical to the region for achieving resilience and sustaining livelihoods in the coming decades? Well, I think we need to think about resilience on different levels, and certainly in more than one dimension. So physical resilience is important, and we talked about the role of mangrove and seagrass and so on. But the business models around that, I think that's where we need to do a lot more work so that local entrepreneurs and local communities can be a core part of that, and they get to enjoy the economic benefits that actually come from that. Resilient food systems, very important. We see that with dwindling fish stocks, fishers have to go further afield to catch fish. Now, there are many causes for that, but climate is one of them. Climate is playing a role in this, and so very important that we actually create the buffers by having more marine protected areas, for example, to ensure that from a fish stock point of view, from a food security and resilience point of view, the Caribbean is not caught out. There's also financial and economic resilience. I'd like to say a few words about this. We saw that in COVID in the region. We recognize the importance for having much more diversified economies. We see that as great ocean nations, more regional political parties are actually putting blue economies into their manifestos. And indeed, some of the countries have had either blue economy departments or blue economy ministries. And this is actually very important start. We think that what the Caribbean Climate-Smart Accelerator is doing is also very important, because it's providing that platform to bring together people with ideas, with investors who can actually help to make some of these ideas happen. I would add to that by saying that equity investors become very important, because not always will people with the brightest ideas have the collateral to get debt financing. So equity investors, equity financing is becoming very important if we want to have a more diversified region, a more innovative region, particularly on the blue economy. We believe that development banks, such as the World Bank, also have an important role to play. In Grenada, we pioneered the first fiscal resilience and blue growth development policy credit. This was a $30 million transaction based on some prior actions, policy actions that the Grenada government had taken. And 30 million came in terms of budgetary support. Now, this created fiscal space which could be used for a whole range of things, including helping our National Development Bank to do the types of transactions that we're talking about. Grenada went on to do more of these transactions, and indeed there seemed to be appetite, at the World Bank to have more of these transactions happen. So we think that these development policy credits, done right, can actually help and be part of the solutions if we care to be a little bit more innovative in terms of how we approach them. So what does innovation in the blue tech economy look like? And what are some of the emergent technologies? I think the first thing is that we need to start with the brain power around the blue economy. So we need to teach blue economy in schools. We need to have more swimming lessons in school. More of the Caribbean people need to learn how to swim, need to learn to scuba dive, need to learn to do things on the sea, need to learn about the blue economy and marine biology in general. In the region, we've seen the buildup of sargassum. This is a great circular economy opportunity that we have now. So sargassum can be used for biogas. It can be used for fertilizer. Clever people can figure out how to get cadmium and arsenic out of sargassum. There's a big role for them to play. Sargassum also has the potential for, for anti-cancer compounds. We need to do a little bit more research on this, but certain sargassums have fucoxanthin, which is seen to be an anti-cancer compound. We need to do a little bit more research on our own sargassum. And this, of course, can be used for, bioplastics, for nutraceuticals and other healthcare products. So we need a much more coordinated effort around sargassum. We need to be a lot more intentional about it. We could also consider developing blue biotech libraries. For example, in Indonesian waters, there are over 90 products that actually come from sponges and non-sponges in Indonesian waters. And these have pharmacological potential. We need to better understand the pharmacological potential of the marine organisms we have. AZT, the first successful treatment for HIV/AIDS, actually comes from Jamaican sea sponge, but we haven't been able to capture the value of this, and we need to do a lot more on blue biotech in general when we think about our commonwealth of the Caribbean Sea. Other areas, aquaculture systems, aquaculture feed, closed-loop aquaculture technologies, electric boats, and so on. All of these things can be looked to. I think some of the opportunities for sustainable economic development and a success story so far, we could look to the Pacific, where they have the OPEC of the sea. So the parties to the Nauru Agreement, for example, is one where the Pacific Islands decide on how much they're going to charge distant water fishing nations to actually fish in their waters through something called the Vessel Day Scheme. People sometimes refer to this as the OPEC of the sea. We need something similar in the region. This regional approach is absolutely essential. And we need to think about it not only for fisheries, but we need to think about it for tourism as well. With cruise tourism, it's a race to the bottom. The Caribbean governments need to come together and have some sort of a treaty where we can see more of the value actually staying, in the Caribbean. And with with some of these income streams, be it from fisheries or from tourism, we can look at how we can securitize these income flows, by issuing blue bonds. Now, we've done some work at the Waite Institute where we've modeled it for 44 island nations around the world. And we see that island nations can actually raise tens, hundreds, and in some cases, even over $1 billion by securitizing some of that income. So these are some of the exciting areas that we see and that we think that the Caribbean should be looking at. In addition to things like the Blue Biotech Library, marine biology education, and coastal medical tourism. So in closing, what are some of the key messages? This is a growing industry, and the Caribbean can play a key and leading role and should be intentional about its leadership on the blue economy. Marine protection and sustainability will be at the heart of this because, of course, ESG investors will be looking for these key performance indicators around things like protection. And we need to show that the Caribbean is actually serious about this and is taking action on this. It's important that blue economy is reflected in national plans. It's important that blue economy becomes an agenda item for CARICOM meetings. And it's vital that we have a coordinated approach for supporting our entrepreneurs in the blue economy, including not just supporting them, but celebrating their success stories. So let me close by congratulating the Caribbean Climate-Smart Accelerator for all the great work that they've done, that they are doing, and for having this type of meeting. We at the Waite Institute were very encouraged by this, and we'd like
Thank you so much, Dr. Friday, for those very interesting comments and for really highlighting the diversity of the blue economy, as well as those frontier subsectors that we really should be digging into here within the region. Coming up on our program, we're going to be featuring our project presentations. We take the opportunity to feature that same diversity in our project this morning. Not only will we have traditional blue economy subsectors included in the batch of projects we present, but we'll also be able to showcase some innovative projects that leverage technology and delve into some of those frontier developments that were mentioned earlier. Following the project's presentation, we will have our 2 investor roundtables focused on commerce, infrastructure, restoration, and preservation within the blue economy. Those roundtables will be moderated by Raquel Moses, UNFCCC Ambassador and CEO for the Accelerator. And I'll take the opportunity while we queue up our featured presentations by our Director of Public Sector Projects, Keisha Farman, to just remind you again of our audience participation rules. Please, if you're now joining us, introduce yourself in the chat and feel free to post your social media information as well as your website links. Also, we're going to have a short Q&A session towards the end of the event. Please go ahead and post your questions for panelists or speakers in the Q&A box, and we'll address them at that time in the agenda. Also, just remember to be courteous in the chat and stay with us right to the end if you want to connect with any of our panelists or speakers, as we'll be posting their information in the chat towards the end of the event. So I'm pleased to introduce to you our Director of Public Sector Projects, Keisha Farman. Keisha, over to you.
And of course, my unmute button just refused to unmute. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session. I'm really pleased to have this opportunity to be able to present to you a cross-section of the projects that we have available here at the Caribbean Climate-Smart Accelerator. Dr. Friday would have expertly set the stage for articulating what is the blue economy, the challenges and the vulnerabilities that we face as small island development states. But I think what was most notable in his presentation is that he focused on the opportunities that we have as a region. And we can definitely agree from his presentation that the region is rife with opportunity. Today, I am presenting a taste or a teaser of these opportunities from the private sector and through the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, both at the national and regional level. This is meant to be a quick scan of the projects that are available for investment, as many of them feature cutting-edge proprietary innovation. Many of our project holders are in the audience, and I encourage you to ask questions in the chat, and I encourage them, if they can, to answer those questions as well. These projects are available for one-on-one matching with investors, and detailed information is available. First, I would like us to focus on the public sector projects. And we have available for today 7 private sector projects valued at 71.1 million. Starting off the lineup, we have Grenada Grows, which is seeking 3.14 million and is open to equity, debt, and angel investing. Grenada Grows is a new company, and in the spirit of the UN SDG number 17, Partnership for Goals, is a public-private partnership with Grenada Solid Waste Management Authority, the government of Grenada, and Organiluck, which is a US agriculture company. Its business model leverages proprietary soil rehabilitation equipment and processes to turn fish waste and other biomass into organic soil enhancement products and compost. Overall, the company intends to develop waste-to-energy and sarcasm treatment facility, and that will look at annually diverting up to 1,800 tons of waste per year, divert the importation of synthetic fertilizers, create livelihood opportunities, and generate soil, which will inevitably lead to increased food yields. In alignment with its social venture mission, GG's Give Back to Grenada will work with its partners through incentive programs and community building initiatives to the benefit of fisherfolk, farmers, and the general public. Next up, we have Keys Farms. Keys Farms is a project out of Jamaica, and in continual alignment with the whole regenerative approach, Keys Farms is a multi-tropic ocean farm network focused on climate change mitigation via mariculture. The business focuses currently on seaweeds, oysters, sea cucumbers, seagrass, and their byproducts. They currently possess a patent for processing activated carbon and biochar using sargassum seaweed, and they anticipate an export market for powdered seaweed, agar, activated carbon, and biochar. Key is a scalable model for developing the blue economy regionally, which will provide green jobs through its expansive ocean farm network model, while sequestering an estimated net 71K metric tons of carbon. This project is looking for 24.7 million and is open to equity, debt, and angel investment over a 4-year period. Next up, we have DigiFish. DigiFish has already been successfully piloted in Barbados through the stewardship project that was funded by the UNDP and Barbados Environmental Conservation Trust using pelagic data systems. This project provides an integrated use of digital technologies and innovative data analytic methods to support the application of an ecosystem approach to fisheries in the Caribbean. This small device attached to fishing vessels is helping to improve digital literacy of fisherfolk and fisheries officials in the Caribbean, while providing access to robust data location and analytics to support fisheries management and marine spatial planning. They're seeking funding to scale to Antigua and Barbuda, on board more vessels in Barbados, Guyana, Jamaica, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and St. Lucia. It is noteworthy that all of these countries have already been oriented to the benefits of this intervention through their participation in the stewardship project. And after seeing the results of Barbados, they are eagerly awaiting adoption. The mangrove and oyster restoration at Savannah Lamar in Jamaica is seeking 1.9 million over a 3-year rollout period. And while they're currently seeking grant financing, they are willing to explore other financing modalities. This project is a really beautiful project. It encompasses all the essential criteria for an ecosystem-based adaptation project. Upon completion of this project, this innovative combination of mangrove barrier, islands, and oyster reefs will offer the coastal zone of Savannah Lamar layered, adaptable, and sustainable protection against storm surge and flooding due to future sea level rise, and will also improve water quality and revive the marine habitat. An interesting fact that I learned while reviewing this project is that one oyster alone can filter up to 150 liters of water per day, removing excess nitrogen and phosphorus, which feeds plankton and increase the growth of algae and also sargassum. The other opportunity I'm quite excited about is the Omega Wind floating wind turbine. This is really an exciting and enormous opportunity. And this wind turbine is designed to specifically address the challenges of traditional offshore wind turbines. At the cutting edge of innovation, T-Omega Wind takes advantage of being on the water rather than fighting it. The floating platform is lightweight, deployable, easy to manufacture, and offers towability, making it perfect for small boatyards. The project has foundational IP in place, initial testing complete, the design and management team in place, technical partners identified, and market opportunities confirmed. The project most recently became a finalist at the Best Clean Tech Green Company 2022 from a large California Economic Development Accelerator, Octane. They're seeking $7.5 million for validation and prototype testing and are currently open to grant and equity investment. Next up, we have Ocean Box. This proprietary self-contained recycling plant is a sustainable mobile off-grid solution for ocean post-consumer and diverted plastic. It is portable, cost-efficient, and closes the loop on marine plastic. It allows for easy cleaning, sorting, processing, and transportation of prepped plastics to recycle product manufacturers. It is built to be modified and unbreakable. And of note, this solution is also nestled within a wider ecosystem approach being rolled out by Strata Sustainability that focuses on transforming waste and wasted spaces into renewable assets. Oceanbox is looking for $77K to scale to 20 locations in the Caribbean in 12 months and are open to long-term strategic equity partners. They have already done a very successful pilot in Bahamas, and so they are definitely a shovel-ready project. Next up is the Woolly Rock Rose JV initiative in the Dominican Republic. This initiative will use a satellite and marine advisory system to monitor and track the sargassum blooms. And as a social enterprise, it will employ local fishermen whose livelihood have been impacted by this sargassum bloom for small-scale harvesting and the use of a proprietary collection system for medium to large-scale quantities of blooms. These blooms will then be turned into added value products, and through a regenerative business model, be able to create sustainable livelihoods for the local communities. There is also a sustainable tourism element to this and a community outreach program for this initiative, as well as an environmental conservation and seaforestation scheme. This pilot project will be implemented at Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic, which is well known for its ecotourism. Woolly Rock Rose is seeking 50 million over a 4-year period and is currently seeking grant financing, but is also willing to explore other financial modalities for the various phases of the project. Finally, under the private sector, the Blue Movement business model includes 3 elements: subsea monitoring platform, big data analytics, and an innovative business model. All these are designed to fill the region's current ocean data gap. Their Blue AI cloud platform generates results, displays time series-based insights, predictive analytics, and produces alerts based on dynamic and predefined thresholds. The Blue Movement goal is to pay back up to 15% of its top-line software sales to platform owners from revenue generated by data repurposed from their specific platforms, defraying some of the maintenance costs. They are currently scoping pilots in Barbados and Bahamas, and Blue Movement is seeking a total of 3.95 million divided into seed financing of 1.5 million, and they're open to grant, commercial or interest-free loan, and round 2 financing of 2.45 million, where they're open to commercial loan or convertible note or equity. The Organization of Eastern Caribbean States is an international intergovernment organization dedicated to regional integration in the Eastern Caribbean. It seeks to provide a one-stop, secure environment for development partners, private sector interests, philanthropic organizations, and others. Grounded in the mission to drive and support sustainable development through regional integration, collective action, and development cooperation, the OECS has put together a suite of blue economy opportunities that we will be presenting today. Its members include Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, Grenada, Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the British Virgin Islands, Anguilla, Martinique, and Guadeloupe. Today, we have the opportunity to briefly highlight these opportunities identified by the OECS at both the national and regional level for blue economy investment in the region. Dominica, we will start off with the national projects, and we are presenting national projects from 5 countries: Dominica, Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia, and St. Kitts and Nevis. The total investment value, 209.9 million. Dominica is home to the world's 2nd largest natural hot springs and is well known for its unique ecological diversity and is home to the Kalinago indigenous population. Invest Dominica also promotes the country's successful citizenship by investment program and is capable of pairing investors with potential blue economy initiatives such as green energy infrastructure, resilient boat storage facilities, fisheries facilities, and enhancement and beach improvement as profiled in this package. The total investment value for the projects in Dominica is 14.5 million. Next up, we have Grenada, which is popularly known as the Spice Isle, is a tri-island nation whose economy is centered around the services sector, with tourism and education sectors at the forefront. Ecotourism and marine investment opportunities can be facilitated by the Grenada Industrial Development Corporation, which has a sterling record for impactful investment facilitation. Investors can choose to expand on Grenada's thriving tourism sector by selecting from sustainable tourism programs and eco-waterfront resorts, or investing in sustainable strategies such as fisheries and pollution prevention. The total of investment for Grenada is 70.8 million. St. Kitts and Nevis is a dual island nation with a vibrant investment promotion agency in the form of the St. Kitts Investment Promotion Authority. And Nevis has actually just recently established its own agency. This opens up many opportunities for investment and an array of blue economy projects, including renewable energy and complementary tourism and environmental initiatives. The total value for investment for St. Kitts and Nevis is 43.5 million. St. Lucia is known for its natural beauty and its very diverse beauty, from mountains to beautiful beaches, and it continues to stand strong amidst the forces of climate change. As they continue to build resilience, there are investments to be made, solar farm enhancements, wind farms, and resilient fisheries facilities, as well as the support of a sustainable resource economy in the form of a village tourism and business accommodation investment as well. So the investment value for St. Lucia is 49.9 million. St. Vincent and the Grenadines continues to thrive as an island nation and continues to build resilience. They are focused on coastal protection infrastructure, beach nourishment, aquaculture, mariculture facilities, and a conversion of fish waste to fertilizer facility, as well as waterfront redevelopment. The total for funding or investment for St. Vincent and the Grenadines is 30.3 million. At the regional level, the OECS has identified for the private sector business opportunities within 5 main sectors. And Dr. Friday would have definitely alluded to some of these. So blue technology, waste management, business, fish processing and added value, marine transportation, and ocean energy. In the case of the blue biotechnology in the OECS, marine resources offer a number of potential opportunities for business ventures. Living marine resources can be used for developing new food, biochemicals, pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, bioenergy applications, among others. The waste management business, given the opportunities for scale at the OECS approach, and because the OES's approach is regional, there is opportunity for recycling of scraps, electronics, plastic, rubber, water waste. All of these can be explored. The fish processing and added value, so significant potential for the investment in fish processing and the introduction of new technologies, also within the area of aquaculture and maritime fishing. Maritime transportation, Dr. Friday would have alluded to this as well. So the World Bank would have done a pre-feasibility assessment of a regional ferry system, providing data and statistics on the movement of people, cargo, and the prices of moving this across the region. And there is a business case for a regional ferry system. And so we encourage investors to look into this opportunity as well. And then within the area of ocean energy, the maritime space of the Caribbean is much more than the land space. So we need to be able to take advantage of this vast ocean space that will help us to deal with the challenges of having limited land space and competing land uses. So based on those 5 areas, the OECS would have come up with different types of partnerships that they're willing to get into. They're looking for private sector investment. They're looking for public-private partnerships, venture capitalists, grants, technical assistance, research monitoring and surveillance, capacity building, technology and knowledge transfer, equipment, and soft loans. They would have come up with 10 blue economy regional concepts at a total implementation value of 127 million, at the regional level, 57.5 million, and at the national level, 69.5 million. I'm just going to very quickly run through these regional concepts, but just remember that if you want additional information on any of these, it can be provided. So very quickly, the OECS is looking at spatial data infrastructure to support marine spatial planning and ocean governance. And this looks at strengthening data and information systems in the OECS to support maritime spatial planning and ocean governance. They're also looking at supporting the blue economy approach and building resilience through capacity building and enhancing the enabling environment in the fisheries sector. They're also focusing on building resilience and mainstreaming the blue economy in the maritime sectors of the OECS, looking at shipping, transportation, but also taking into consideration pollution, enforcement, and surveillance. Support for the blue economy approach through ecological restoration and strengthening management systems for maritime protected areas looks at coastal and marine ecological systems by undertaking ecological restoration and enhancing existing or establishing new maritime protected areas. They're looking at building resilience for maritime ecosystem and support for the blue economy approach through the reduction of maritime pollution, as well as exploring blue economy opportunities in facilitating investment decisions. So looking at the benefits and the feasibilities of the opportunities that are being presented to the region. In the area of maritime spatial planning, they're looking at improving the efficiency of regulatory processes, governing national activities, which includes cross-sectional boundaries through maritime spatial planning, capacity planning, and cooperation, as well as exploring maritime energy potential within the region. So strengthening the capacity of the OECS region to develop and use maritime renewable energy and support increased use of sustainable energy in maritime-based economic activities. They're also looking at strengthening the enabling environment for bioprospecting and technology use that will support blue bioprospecting and biotechnology. And finally, promoting a climate risk-based approach to coastal planning in the OECS, where they look at the impact of sea level rise on the Eastern Caribbean shorelines and coastal ecosystems, as well as the coastal infrastructure, and proposed appropriate planning and adaptation responses. So if any of these projects have piqued your interest or project concepts have piqued your interest and you would like to get additional information, please reach out to us. We thank you, and we hope to have many questions and areas of interest that we can address later on in the forum. Thank you.
Hello and morning, and I'm so excited to have the conversation today with a few of our investors. We'll have Pep Ardui and Rick Warner, who will be projects within the OECS. Can we have both Pep and Rick on camera so that we can start our conversation? Wonderful. Hi. Hello, guys. How are you doing?
Good morning. Very well, thanks. How are you?
Wonderful.
Very good.
Wonderful.
Glad to be here.
Excellent. So I wanted to get started by talking about just giving you both a chance to introduce yourselves and to introduce your investment interest in the, what are you looking for? Pep, I'll start with you. I know you're at the World Bank. And so tell us a little bit about the kinds of projects that you guys are looking for.
Thanks, and a good question. So I am with the International Finance Corporation, which is the private sector arm of the World Bank Group. I will not put up slides to bore everyone, but I will say that it is important to understand the differentiation or the distinction between the World Bank and IFC. So many people will know the World Bank Group and will associate any entity in the bank group typically with either IBRD or IDA, which are the main sort of lending elements of the World Bank. The World Bank itself lends to and provides technical assistance and a range of financial instruments to governments. So they work with sovereign governments. The IFC, or the International Finance Corporation, being the private sector arm, works exclusively with private sector partners. So we lend to and invest in. So we provide debt and equity to companies. Those can be large multinationals from different parts of the world that are investing in developing countries. And so you have to be a member of IFC to qualify for where that investment is taking place. Those could be SMEs, local small companies, many of which, for example, have just been presented as investment opportunities. Sometimes we make those investments directly, and sometimes we provide lines of credit to local commercial banks, which are then on lent at attractive rates to a specific sector. It could be that we create a lending window for renewable energy, could be in the blue economy, it could be in agribusiness and agri-processing, for example. And then I think the last thing I would say is that often, while we focus on the private sector, in larger countries, we do have the opportunity to invest in municipal or sub-sovereign, so it's city government or municipal or regional government, but never at the national government level. IFC is a commercial entity. And so while we do have access to blended finance, to concessional finance, which can make the terms more attractive, we still assess debt or equity investments with a commercial lens. That means we do a full due diligence on the company. We look at the business model, we look at the country risk, and then we price accordingly. So we do not provide grant financing or very long-term, very concessional debt, such as the World Bank. In some cases, the World Bank will provide a zero interest 30-year loan. That is not something that IFC is able to offer. But we do offer a range of products that do, I think, provide real options for companies, both small and large, depending on the window that you choose. Hopefully that provides an overview.
It does. And I know, and I'll come back to you after, Rick, but I know that IFC is willing to be innovative, and I think that's one of the things that we desperately need to see in these times. Rick, so tell us a little bit about your investment interest in the kinds of projects that you're pursuing.
Yeah, absolutely. I will pop a couple slides up here really quick, but let me show this one to you here. Is that coming across all right?
I'm not seeing it yet.
Oh,
there we go. Yep, there we go.
All right. Yeah. So Coastal 8 is a public benefit corporation, and we think of ourselves as a resiliency systems integrator. And the reason I wanted to pop a couple slides up here is this is what we're founded on in our thinking, that we are the generation that has to take action to address the IPCC reports, obviously. But we see it as Angus said, $1 trillion opportunity from a business standpoint and investment standpoint. What we've seen and observed over, believe it or not, 5 years of diligence, that environmental and economic and social systems are tied together. We believe market-driven solutions ensure abundant resilience when measured properly, which ties back, Raquel, to some of the work we've been working on with the resiliency scorecard. And we tend to look over the long horizon. We're looking at 20-year type investments of blended money, debt, equity, philanthropic impact across the board, because we believe that there's a systemic approach to this that is the way you can actually take a coastal community and migrate it to prosperity. And that has to be measured from an ROI standpoint and a GDP standpoint. So when we think we believe to address the climate issues, that the siloed approaches of projects are all wonderful and they're incremental steps, but given the magnitude of the issue we're facing with climate change, and as Angus said, the link between the ocean and climate change and life on Earth, it has to be scaled up and sped up, the way John Doerr looks at this from Kleiner Perkins. I think his model in his book is excellent, except where I disagree with him is that he says small island developing states need to be dealt with later. We need to address the bigger countries in the scale. Our premise is you have to do both, and as a priority. So to move that all forward, we believe in this. This is our approach. So a lot of the projects that, for example, Keisha mentioned, we see fitting within these buckets. And we believe that this is our crazy math, 14 plus 13 plus 15 equals 8. Mm-hmm. So, and we can pull the other SDGs if we can have enough room economically and spiritually to make this happen. So that's really what Coastal 8 is about. And I'll stop sharing there and we can go from there.
Thanks so much, Rick. So going back to you, Pep, tell us about maybe an interesting project that you think, sort of highlights how IFC invests and the kind of difference that IFC can make.
It'd be difficult, I think, to pick a single one, but I can give you sort of two extremes.
Okay.
In the space of the blue economy, there is clearly a lot of interest and need to address the energy transition. We have in many of our islands, and for full disclosure, I'm from Dominica, for those interested. In many of our islands, we have way more ocean territory than we do land territory. In some islands, land availability is a real constraint, not in all, but certainly in many. And therefore, if we talk about the energy transition and transition to renewables, the key question is, where are you going to put these solar panels and where are you going to put these wind turbines so that we can both produce enough power for our own needs, but also potentially think about economic generation activities such as production of green hydrogen. Angus was talking about sargassum. All of that needs to be processed, right? How do you handle supply chains and where do you put things, particularly in some of the more mountainous islands, Dominica, St. Lucia, but also the smaller ones. Barbados, extremely constrained in terms of land. There's always a trade-off between housing, agriculture, because we're talking about food sustainability or self-sufficiency, and then energy production. And so we can look at the blue economy. I won't say that these projects are live, but we're increasingly looking at offshore wind. And I was interested to see the T-Omega wind floating concept. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that and sort of what the company's plans are to get to scale. But if we look at offshore wind, the investment requirements for an offshore wind project are anywhere between 200-300 million and up, depending on the size of the plant or the size of the development that you're looking at. There's an awful lot of work that has to go into it up front before you get to the investment piece. So, one example of how we would approach that is to say, okay, well, there's a need to do upfront work related to marine spatial planning. Again, Angus brought this up in his messaging, to look at the legal framework, to look at, who owns what part of an asset, how does this integrate with the grid. So that's all what I would call early stage project development. We use the language internally of upstream, but I understand that that's quite, quite a sensitive term because it is often linked to oil and gas. But we look at early stage project development. So all of the upfront softer pieces, legal, regulatory, environmental, mapping, costing, financial analyses, kind of project development work. Before we get to the point of an investment. And then when you get to the point of an investment, we're looking at deal structuring. So how do you structure, for the sake of argument, a $300 million project that, needs to have the appropriate risk allocation? Where would IFC bring in equity versus, looking at equity from other partners? And then how do we bring in the right amount of debt? So there's an example of how we would structure something that's blue economy related. Now, we have not yet done anything in the Caribbean in the offshore wind space, but if you were to sort of shrink that down, we're currently looking at a very live opportunity in the energy transition space in Barbados. This is related to green hydrogen. Again, it's all terrestrial, it's all land-based, but it's looking at solar PV plus battery plus hydrogen to provide firm power. It's a 13.5 megawatt system. The sponsor is HDF, which is a French company, but it's very much based in Barbados. So, the Renewstable project, as it's called, really is kind of anchored in sort of the local economy. So, there's an example of a tangible, smaller, I'm talking about the 13.5 megawatt versus a 400 megawatt offshore wind example. But, that's where we would bring both the early stage, and what we're supporting with HDF is some of that early stage stuff. So let's look at the environmental and social assessments. Let's look at some of the implications for tax. Let's look at how you structure this so that it has the biggest contribution to the local economy before we have the opportunity. It's an option, it's not a requirement to invest on the back end. So that's sort of one category of investment. The other category of investments, as I was mentioning in my preamble, relates to SMEs and sort of smaller companies. So how do we support, let's talk again in the energy space, just to kind of keep this simple, about companies that are doing solar water heaters or rooftop solar panels with battery. Again, that's all part of the resilience agenda. We're looking at more decentralized power generation, but also helping to keep money in the pockets of sort of local SMEs from a installation perspective and a power generation perspective. So in those cases where the investments are not $200-300 million, or even I would say sort of 40-50 million US dollars and up, the question that we often ask ourselves is, how do we make this cost effective for the borrower? One thing that people have to understand is that the more complex the project, the more upfront project development requirement, the more risk required,
Sure.
the smaller the project, right? The more you often still need to do large
it
amount
almost
of work.
costs the same.
Right. Yeah, it may not be the same, but proportionally, it may actually be higher. Right. So if you have a $1-2 million project and we have to do due diligence, we have to do legal and regulatory, lawyers. I'm not a lawyer, but lawyers are expensive, right? All of a sudden your project development costs are like 2-3 million and your investment opportunity is 2-3 million. And you ask yourself, does that make sense? So IFC, being the institution that we are, we're very focused on integrity due diligence, on environmental and social safeguards, right, to make sure that a project is done the right way, but that all has a cost. So we often ask ourselves, does it make more sense to have us as a large, sometimes, weighty institution doing all of this, or do we then go and work with an RBC or a CIBC or a Republic Bank and say, look, we understand that you have a pretty good footprint. You're in, country A, B, and C in the region. You understand local SME partners who come to you for financing, but you don't have a line of credit that's affordable. Right? Some cases you may. Barbados is a very liquid market, but not all markets are liquid. And you don't know how to best assess or how to effectively assess this particular type of business. So you know how to assess a restaurant business, you may know how to assess the tourism business, you may even know how to assess the boat and the fishing business, but you're not quite sure what are the risks you should be looking at in the solar panel business. So what we would then do is say, okay, why don't we help train your local loan officers, regionally even, to understand everything that they need to about this particular subset of the renewable space. We help them do efficient, cost-effective, and well-done due diligence, and we provide a line of credit that then they can on-lend. So they create a specific window. Equally, that window could be, again, I'm using the example of renewables, but that window could be for women in agribusiness. It could be for indigenous populations in local homegrown or home-based tourism. So how do we provide that money as well as a training and upskilling for loan officers so that they can do the lending? And frankly, that cuts down the cost significantly, which means that the cost of the loan to the borrower is reduced, right? So we're trying to find the most cost-effective way. In many instances, we will not, take the bulk. In fact, we have a restriction depending on debt or equity of how much of the loan we can take. So we will syndicate. We'll go to, the IDB or the Caribbean Development Bank and ask them to come in. So it's not about us grabbing all of it. Nothing is ever going to be 100% IFC investment. Again, as a risk-averse financial institution, we want to kind of spread the risk amongst development partners. And again, each development partner brings their own flavor to the game. So
and we love this idea of collaboration across the region. We think it's so very important. And I wanna ask you, Rick, just for a quick example as we wrap up this panel and move to the next panel. But give us a quick example of a project, a tangible project that you've either invested in or that you're looking at and open to considering.
Let me answer the question in a slightly different way.
Okay.
One of the things we're looking at now after this diligence period and a lot of the perspective that there's a fundamental chasm in the financing world of billions and trillions of dollars available that are being perceived inappropriately from a risk-adjusted rate of return. And we think that is fundamentally from a project-by-project view of things. And organizations, meaning coastal communities, struggling to justify wind, solar, ag, whatever the case may be, against each other instead of a unified scaled plan. And I walked away from the Ocean Conference shifting Coastal 8's objectives to, I think we need to flip the question, we being the Caribbean or an island nation or coastal community, to say, if I had $1 billion to spend over 20 years to address my NDCs and SDGs in $100,000 increments, how would I invest it at the leadership of the government level? So with that approach, we believe that if we can get the answer to that question from 3 or 4 regional islands, model that appropriately, then we'll be in a position to actually adjust the total risk and scale up addressing what is needed to actually create SDG 8, a sustainable and prosperous program. So to that effort, we've been in discussions with Dominica, for example, to model that investment. And so our ask is, if you're a coastal community in the Caribbean at the leadership level, give us the answer to that question. Then we're going to put it into a model and build the consortium to place that money appropriately over that period of time. And actually, our goal is within the next 3 years to have one island fully funded at that level.
Beautiful. Thank you both so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And we're gonna, Pep, was that a finger to say?
It was a hand, and then I realized you have to jump into the next panel. But I did just want to share a reaction to Rick's point, which I think is a very important one, and one that I fully share. I do not believe that we can solve development challenges, whatever they are, let alone related to resilience and climate change, which are fundamentally systemic and intertwined through a project-by-project approach. I could not agree more. I believe that every country should have a comprehensive resilience development strategy, which is, woven into their long-term development plan. I think there's a long list of challenges that one faces in getting to that point. You need data to look at the risk perspective, right? So you have to look at the hazards, you have to look at your vulnerability and your exposure. So I think having that kind of glass half empty perspective is key. Having the glass half full perspective, which is what are our long-term development aspirations in the social and economic space, which then require infrastructure, onshore, offshore, blue economy, and all of those pieces that contribute to your development aspirations. And I think the third piece is, okay, so what are the projects and which of these projects are investable? So for folks like me at IFC, which of them are fundamentally not investable? Yeah. Those are going to require grants. And we know that in the social space, there's no way you should try and be doing the financials on schools or on small fishing storage facilities. That just doesn't make sense. Those will require grants. And I won't even call them grants. The purpose of a government is to either make development happen or facilitate development. They collect taxes, they allocate money, they spend it in a certain way, and that money should go to the projects that have the biggest return on investment. I'd like to call it kind of return. Yeah,
but I think sometimes making those decisions is really hard. Huh? So
it is hard, but my last one sentence on this is, if governments cannot deliver, there is no point in asking for money. And having led an agency, aimed at delivery, I know how difficult that is. It's difficult in government, it's difficult outside of government. So it's really, really important not just to ask for, the Christmas tree and here are all the projects we want to finance, but to show that that money can be spent effectively, and it's actually harder. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't ask for the $1 billion. I fully agree. Yeah. But it's harder to spend effectively than people think. And this is where I think you take that $1 billion and say, for the next 3 years, we need this 100 million, and this is how we're going to execute on it. And that execution piece, I think, is critical. But I did want to just agree with Rick's key tenet.
Fabulous. And that's a really great segue into the next panel, where we're going to be talking about some innovations in funding. And so I'll ask the next set of panelists to jump on. We have Karen Sack, Karen Panton, Yabanex Batista, and Harry to join us on the next panel. Fabulous. Thank you and welcome all of you. Good to see many of you again, and wonderful. So I'll ask Karen to start with Karen Panton. Yes, I realize we have two Karens. Karen, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing?
So wonderful. I'm just delighted to be here. First, Raquel, thank you so much to SMART for the invitation, and good morning to everyone. I'd just like to say I'm the Executive Director for the Bahamas Protected Areas Fund. We are a National Conservation Trust Fund, and for those of you who may not know what that is, we are a sustainable financing mechanism. Our purpose is to find funding, long-term funding, for biodiversity conservation generally, and more specifically protected areas, as well as climate resilience. We've been working over the past couple of years on implementing a facility provided by the German government and the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund for assessments and restoration activities following the devastation of Hurricane Dorian. Should I stop there or should I go on a little bit more?
No, that's a good place to start. I will definitely come back to you, and then I'll go to Karen Sack, the Executive Director of Aura.
Thanks so much, Raquel. It's lovely to be here and among so many Karens too. I am Karen Sack. I'm the Executive Director of the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance, which is a global alliance working across multiple sectors. So we include governments, civil society, private banks, multilateral banks, insurance companies amongst our members. And our goal is to drive at least $500 million of investment into coastal and marine ecosystems by 2030 and build the resilience of at least 250 million climate vulnerable coastal people by that date as well. And really, we try and do that through insurance and finance products. And that means we all need to play together to join the dots to get there. And it's wonderful to be on this panel as well with Yaba, who, given the collaboration between Aura and the Global Fund for Coral Reef. So I will stop there, but so lovely to see him on this as well.
Well, Yaba, since Karen introduced you, I'll go to you next.
Thank you very much, Raquel, and good morning, everyone. Truly a pleasure to be here with all of you and being back to the Caribbean. So as already mentioned by Karen, I'm with the Global Fund for Coral Reefs. I'm the deputy head of the UN Global Team. The Global Fund for Coral Reefs is a blended finance mechanism focused on safeguarding the most resilient reefs around the world. The way we work and go about this is that we, through our programs and intervention, we focus on protecting the most resilient reefs based on science. We also then work on transforming the activities that currently degrade the ecosystems and give it more stress, provide more stress to the ecosystem to become more resilient. We turn those into reef positive activities. But we know that for having success in this quest to safeguarding coral reefs around the world, we cannot only focus on the protection of the ecosystems, we also need to start thinking and working already on restoring coral reefs ecosystems. And of course, we cannot do any of what I've just said without focusing on the work and the role of communities. So we also work on making sure that communities are also solution providers, and we can also help them through our programs to recover from shocks like climate change and the COVID pandemic. In a nutshell, we have two mechanisms in this blended finance approach right now. One is a grant fund, and we use those grants as concessional loans, grants, regular grants, and guarantees to help attract private sector investment to build what we call reef positive solutions around marine protected areas, ecotourism, management of wastewater and pollution in general. We also focus on building new financial mechanisms like bonds or reef insurance mechanisms, blue carbon schemes as part of our overall approach. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much. And Hari Balsubramanian, hopefully I've gotten that correct. Definitely want to have you introduce yourself, and then I'm going to ask you to layer a different, to sort of answer the second question, which is how, because I think that there may be a lot of unique opportunities. And I know the last time we talked about unique opportunities that really weren't being capitalized. So it'd be great to hear from you. Yes, eco investors, interest, and some unique opportunities that might be available.
Sure, thanks, Raquel. And it's a pleasure being on this panel. Lots of old friends on the panel and in the community. And just to let you all know, I have a soft place in my heart for the region. I started my career in Barbados, scuba diving for 8 hours a day. I did my master's research in Cuba, so the region is close to my heart, and I wish I was still underwater in the Caribbean. So I run two organizations, Eco Advisors and Eco Investors Capital. Both play a bridge between capital and environmental solutions around the world. So I started the advisory business 10 years ago, coming from the nonprofit space. recognizing that we needed more capital flowing towards positive environmental solutions, and that people wanted to flow that capital but didn't quite know how. So effectively what we play is a bridge or a translation service between capital holders and community and projects on the ground. And it really relates to what we were talking about earlier, and many of the panelists and Angus talked about in the keynote, which is kind of this systems level approach and thinking about problems and solutions at a more macro level than in silos. So we've dedicated our advisory business to that, and now are launching an investment platform to allow for sort of investment opportunities across the capital stack, across investment types, sectors, and geographies. So we're globally focused. We invest in environmental solutions across the spectrum in sectors, but nature-based solutions is very prevalent in our work, given our background, but also given the opportunities for climate emission reductions, as well as the connection between the status of nature and biodiversity as an underpinning of the global economy. In terms of opportunities that we see in this space, I think I'm going to reflect a little bit on what we heard some of the other panelists talk about, which is that solutions exist. We just need to be creative about how to bundle them together in packages that make sense. So Yaba and your team are doing some great work in blended finance. I think we need to think about more blended finance approaches. What we think about in this region and in blue economy investing in particular is how do you construct a solution set that's relevant for the communities on the ground that can translate to an investable asset class, and not just what we heard from the IFC in terms of an investable solution for their private investment thesis, but across a series of investor types and how they can play in an individual transaction and blend those approaches and risk return profiles into transactions that make sense at a scope and scale and relevance for the opportunities and solutions that we need. So we spend a lot of time thinking about the system and then about how all the actors need to play together in terms of making the transaction and opportunities work. And then what is missing in those in the investable or in the investment ecosystem, and how we can bolster that with primarily with grant funding. So our advisory mandate links us to a lot of major foundations, family foundations, and corporate foundations. And we use this kind of systems level approach to help on the strategic side for these foundations on where to invest to build organizational and technical capacity in order to make the enabling conditions for the investment more robust in order for those investments to succeed. And I think coming back to why we structure the organizations in this way is that the advisory business has been very successful in influencing capital. We've influenced nearly $4.5 billion since our founding 10 years ago. We've been asked to be an asset manager as well, which is why we're building Eco Investors as an asset management platform. What we fully acknowledge, though, is that investment dollars alone, and I think I heard someone else say this, investment dollars alone aren't going to solve the problem if we don't have the enabling environment for those dollars to be productive. If we can't build the absorptive capacity in regions to make the money be spent in a way that's suitable and robust. So we need kind of that advisory and technical capability and absorptive capacity in order to have the solution set that's relevant for these massive problems that we're facing. And the numbers are staggering, but I think we can build enough capacity in this region and across coastal communities around the world in order to absorb the relevant capital to solve the problems that we're all looking at.
Yeah, that was a great point that Pep made from IFC. And so I'm going to go to you, Karen, next about some unique opportunities that you're seeing within Karen Panton within the environment, because I definitely want to, once I go to you, Karen Panton, I want to talk to Karen Sack about, this approaching this through insurance is an innovation. It is something new. And just what are you seeing in terms of how it's rolling out? So first to you, Panton, then Karen Sack.
Wonderful. So it's pretty amazing sitting here listening to all the panelists hit on so many of the issues that we are seeing, not only in the Bahamas where I'm based, but also in the Caribbean, issues of capacity, issues related to just readiness and having that framework that investors can come in and readily make or evaluate their risk and so forth. I think for the Bahamas, what we're saying as it relates to the blue economy is how do we have both the ecological or the ecosystems restoration and that sustainable development piece that blends. We don't see this as something that is competitive. We don't see it as one or the other. These things have complementarity and they need to be worked on together. there are opportunities, certainly with coastal resilience, and we heard Dr. Angus speak of that, Dr. Friday, sorry, he spoke on that earlier in the session. There are opportunities, of course, with the nationally determined contributions in terms of renewables, moving away from fossil fuels, and all of us with our plans to go to either 30 by 2030 or, to be carbon neutral by 2050. So we're seeing this, but here in the Bahamas, we're also seeing a situation where there's not complete readiness. We know our investors are looking for bankable projects, are looking for returns, but we're also looking here in Bahamas for a certain amount of capacity to help us to get to that point. We want to co-create together. And I think when we're looking at those possibilities like electromobility, whether it's marine or tidal energy, or whether it's sustainable fisheries or sustainable tourism, we need some assistance. So we're excited here at the Bahamas Protected Areas Fund that we're working on bringing the type of technical assistance as well as the funding together. We're working with one of Yaba's programs or one of his projects, Bahama Reefs, with the Nature Conservancy to see how we can have the sort of assessment and capacity and the needs to bring that blended finance. Right now, we're a grant-making agency only, but we want to get into the space where we can help the small and medium businesses also make a living from coastal resilience, from nature-based solutions, and all the other wonderful things that countries are doing in order to become sustainable.
Fabulous, and thank you so much. And I know that, I'll go to Karen Sack next, but I know that Harry had some really great ideas. This is really meant to be an introduction to these investors that then we use to develop relationships over time. So unfortunately, after Karen speaks, I'll go to Yaba and ask him to say some final words, and we'll close this panel, but we will then send you all the projects that we've received and seek to continue this. This is really meant to be just how we introduce the public to you, and then those that don't know you already, because you're all famous to me, and then we'll go from there to try and matchmake you with some of the opportunities that are available. So Karen, tell us about this innovation that you're working on, and you've been doing this absolutely forever. So, I mean, I think if this is where you've landed, this has to be the thing that will unlock capacity and capability for us.
Well, thanks so much, Raquel. And I think what's so important, having listened to everyone this morning, is just thinking about the tools in the toolbox that we need to deploy here. There's some who argue it's not just about the individual projects and that we need to deploy large amounts of funding. And there are others that really focus on the projects because that's what we need to grow from the ground up. And so from our perspective, it's really an all of the above approach. Yeah. We focus on three key elements. The first is, how do we get the big asset managers, the large investors, to invest in an equitable and sustainable blue economy, and not just a blue economy that may perpetuate the status quo? And it's really important that we all focus on that together. The second is thinking about how we take some of these community-led projects and products and build them through a funnel so that they can become investable propositions, so that they can become those bankable propositions for the larger investors. And the third is really thinking about then how we go to scale, how we develop the type of global ocean financial architecture that's needed to really get to the billions and trillions that we need invested in this space. And one of the things we keep coming up against is the risk question. All through, everyone has talked about risk, and where better to go than to the insurance sector for risk. So we are working both with the investment sector and the insurance sectors. The insurance sector is a huge asset manager as well. And for example, I'll just throw out one quick example of some work we've done over the last 2 years to show what's possible. So we worked with the Inter-American Development Bank to do a quick assessment of the value of the Mesoamerican Reef, working with the Mesoamerican Reef Fund. So they work across Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, and Belize. The study found that there were annual environmental services worth $183 million in fisheries, 3.9 billion in tourism, and between 320 and 440 million dollars in coastal protection.
Wow.
With that data in hand, Willis Towers Watson, the insurance broker, could actually create a parametric insurance product to protect some of the reefs some of the reef areas in the Mesoamerican reef when an extreme storm hits. That product went to market within 12 months. It was invested into by AXA XL and AXA Climate, has now been supported by the Insure Resilience Development Fund, and is now being invested in by the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, and has the potential to expand across the Caribbean and the Pacific. Anywhere where there is a coral reef in place, and there are hurricanes, and we certainly know that there are lots of places who are going to endure those things. And key to these parametric products is a quick payout straight after the storm, and training of reef defenders or reef rangers who can get in the water to help keep the reef clean in advance, as well as clean up the reef afterwards. And it also pays those folks who don't have jobs after an extreme storm event, and keeps the economy going. So these are some of the solutions that we're looking at that we've got to work together to drive, but that are entirely possible and scalable. And we're so excited as well that the Global Fund for Coral Reefs and others are jumping on board, the UK's Blue Planet Fund, the Canadian government. There's real impetus behind this. And this is where we've got to blend all those opportunities together to move it forward.
Wonderful. And Yaba, thank you so much for some final words as we close out this panel and move to the next featured presentation.
Thank you so much, Raquel. I think from my perspective, what I would like to highlight is that throughout this conversation, we have been talking about how the global financial system is shifting to more environmentally sound, socially sound investments. And that is not an easy road. It's still relatively new. And all the efforts that we have been hearing about today are definitely going to be showing the pathway for that. But in this pathway, I think from where I stand, I think we need to also differentiate and highlight a few things. That the first one is that one thing is for investors to come in and think about where they put their financial resources, and they do that by thinking that they're going to invest in a company or in a project that is environmentally sound, that is socially sound. So that is their approach. But we need to complement that with very strong monitoring and evaluation of the actual project, of the actual impact. Yes. And that is really the only way that we are going to know that these investments are making the change that we want to see happen. And that's why in the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, all of our program, they have a very strong monitoring and evaluation component. We provide financial resources in our programs that focus on building the M&E baseline. And then therefore we provide the resources so that this M&E can be continuously done. And I think that's going to be absolutely key now and in the future. The other thing I wanted to mention is the scale point. I think both Harry and Karen Sack mentioned this, that is crucial from a blended finance perspective. This is why blended finance has come to exist, because we know grants are not enough anymore for conservation and for restoring ecosystems. So we do need to work with philanthropies and with public sector partners to deploy grants in a different way so that we can really attain that scale that we are seeking if we want to achieve what the world wants to achieve by 2030. Thank you, Raquel.
Thank you so much. And now, oh, yes, Ari.
I just wanted to have one last point.
Sure.
We talked a lot about sort of the investability of projects. I want to flip it around a little bit as well, and just to highlight the fact that the investor community needs a lot of education and learning as well. Yes. Around what the realities are on the ground, because you can't sit in Midtown Manhattan and try to make investments or decisions or work with communities in the region. You really have to understand and know. I think there's a learning happening, but it's very slow going. I think the institutions are going slower, but there's an interesting thing happening in the world right now in the family office space. There's about $55 trillion in the internet generational transfer of wealth. And many of the younger generation are looking for a different way to think about investing. Mm-hmm. And Karen, you talked about risk, and insurance is a great conventional way to manage risk, but we also need new tools to understand what risk actually is, because automatically the conventional institutional investors think about the region as a whole as a risk. So we're going to think about that as risky. But there's ways to manage the risk outside of insurance as well. And I think we need a lot of education for the investor community to understand how to actually engage in these markets.
I couldn't agree more. And I think there's a translation that needs to occur between the investors and the projects, because, you know, and I think that's such a valuable point that didn't even really completely occur to me before, that yes, we need definitely more mature projects and projects that are investment ready, but there's a learning that needs to take place on both sides if we're going to close the gap and close it quickly. So thank you for that. Those were great final words. And now I hand over to Keisha Farnham, who will present one of the projects that we have in progress. Thank you so much to all of our investors.
Thank you so much for that, Raquel, and really excited to have this conversation with our featured projects, CRDC Global and Resin 8. And to start off the conversation, we're just going to view a very, very short video clip to just kind of level set and set the stage for what we're about to listen to. Excellent. And I see you're already on camera. So it is my distinct pleasure to welcome Donald Thompson, the founder and chief executive officer of CRDC. And Donald, I think a good place for us to start would be for you to tell us about what we've just looked at.
Well, first off, thanks everybody for this opportunity. It's really incredible for us to have this chance to talk to you, everyone today. Probably the best way to explain what you just saw is a little bit of history of CRDC. CRDC stands for the Center for Regenerative Design and Collaboration. Those regenerative design and collaboration are critical and key to the company, but they go way back. I'm a Canadian, but I've lived in Costa Rica for half of my life, 32 years or so. I'm a developer. I developed on both the very highest end and the lowest end under a government-approved project called Symbiosis Social, or social symbiosis, where high-end development could help the poor people, the low-income buyers. We made a career of that. We still see today as the housing deficit worldwide is one of the bigger problems. So we're focused on a couple of problems here, and how we got to this point is in about 2000 or about 2010, 2009, our development company sponsored a small little music school on the beach. And I think this story will talk to a lot of things I heard about the blue economy today. This little music school, these are the poor families that worked for the people in the resort, a lobster fishing village, and even under Costa Rican terms, some pretty extreme poverty. Kids didn't have anything. So what we thought we could do is we'd try to see if we could make some social reform by creating an educational program. And where we went with that, oddly, was a classical music school. We took these really poor kids and we bought them cellos and violins, and we started a music school. The music school was right on the sand, right on the beach, 20 meters from the ocean, 100 meters from a beautiful river, the mangrove right behind us, and an estuary on this side. The wateriest, bluest environment that you could ever imagine. And Over the years that we had that little school, we realized it was becoming threatened. It was becoming threatened by the ocean itself. We could physically see climate change happening. I'm not a musician, so what we first started to do was plant mangrove. Fascinated with mangrove reforestation and how it could protect our property, how we could teach the kids about the importance of regenerative design and carbon storage. And how we did that actually was when we picked up I don't know if you've ever seen a red mangrove seed, but it looks like a skinny cucumber. And when we'd go collect bottles on the beach, the kids would have to help me clean the beach. And we'd utilize those big bottles of little greenhouses so the crabs wouldn't eat the roots of our mangrove seeds. That's where CRDC started. It started as a small music school, picking up plastic on the beach, becoming very concerned with the environment, and realizing over the years as a developer in that area, we were trying to sell very high-end properties. The beach would be typically nice and clean after we cleaned it, but if we get in a pollution bloom come in and we had potential buyers there, we could lose buyers just like that. So as a real estate developer, the ocean, the pollution, it was threatening our livelihood. And if it threatened our livelihood as high-end developers, we couldn't then share that money on the low-income sector. So, it became a serious issue for us. This plastic was hurting our economy while we lived in this watery environment. So that's where it started. It started as a pragmatic project, humble project to try to find a solution for plastic waste. So we went forward and we tried to sell those used bottles. Obviously, no one wanted these bottles that were full of mangrove mud. And we tried to see what could we do next. And then we developed in about 2012 as just joking with the kids. The kids jumped up and down in some bottles, and I saw slate tiles. So I went in ahead and I patented a bottle that converted to a tile, a piece of plastic that could be converted into a long-term appreciating asset on a house for people that needed it. And those positive externalities made a lot of sense to me. And this is pretty early on. We weren't even talking yet that much about the circular economy, but it made a lot of sense to me. If we could take this problem, that it's a pretty huge problem, and we could convert that into something that had value both to the community and to the environment, and it made economic sense, made sense. So we went ahead, kind of jokingly, I told the kids if we did this, we'd build them a new school. We patented it and it was successful, we'd build a new school. Well, we did patent it and it was successful. It won all kinds of sustainability awards in the packaging industry around the world. And it set us off in this course of really deeply studying what the circular economy meant, what made common sense to do with plastic in reality, and what were the realities of the real realities of the blue economy. Here we are in a fishing village. People make their living off of fishing. The lobsters we're bringing back are only this big now. They're no longer this big. How do we start to improve all of these things? How do we house these people? So it's that blended thinking, that concept of social symbiosis that turned us on to the idea of industrial symbiosis. So in about 2014 or so, my capital partners in that little bottle decided to buy me out. I wanted to be bought out because they wanted to sell water. I wasn't interested in the water business. I was more interested in the environmental business. And by 2018, we created a bit of a reputation for ourselves. We fashioned our own business model that was recognized in Davos called REAP, Recover, Enrich, Appreciate, Prosper.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you to elaborate on that. Yeah.
Where the input is related, where the value stream of one industry is taken from the waste stream of the other industry. And that interrelationship is what we call REAP. And REAP was actually the perfect acronym, because if you put a special effort into something, then you could reap the rewards. Yeah. So that concept, it won actually the People's Choice Award in Davos. And then there was so much conversation around the circular economy, we just felt action was required. So we no longer use REAP as just another business model. We actually use it as a call to action. And we utilize it as a call to action to children. So the roots of our program are educational. And Still today, education plays a critical role to what we do. And so what we did.
Segue into, and you're such an excellent storyteller, Donald. Segue into how we got to Resonate. So we would have identified that the plastic problem was not a singular problem, and that there was definitely an exploration of interrelationships between different industries, particularly in this instance, the construction industry. So how did we arrive at Resonate, and what is Resonate?
So, when you're awarded for coming up with a plastic solution, well, that's all great. And you create one bottle that creates one tile.
Mm-hmm.
That was fun. It was, from a design perspective, it was great. But it wasn't going to change the world. It wasn't going to make any difference at all. But what was going to make the difference was this interrelationship between the construction industry and the resin industry. That could make a giant difference. So in about 2018, we went about saying, listen, we were quite strong in the concrete products industry, and the construction industry is so massive. Well, it's so massive, talking about climate, it absorbs or it utilizes 40% of our carbon budget. So the construction world, our world, is really looking at solutions. What can we do to lower this burden that we're creating?
Yeah.
And aggregates are the number one used commodity below water in the world. Aggregates are a massive, massive market, and so much so, and we're building so quick with our population explosion, that if we took all of the plastic in the world, let's say right now it'd be about 400 million tons, and we converted that into the aggregate product that we create, that you saw in the video, that sand substitute, it would only equate to 2.8% of the aggregate market. So we realized that, okay, here's a logical place. Here's a logical place that we could take all of the world's plastic and we could put it to use into housing. Now, as builders, we certainly don't want to have a sub-quality product. We can't do what they call horizontal landfill. We can't just hide plastic in our building. It had to bring
Value.
attributes and value. So the value was we patented a methodology to make it adhere extremely well to concrete. But it's essentially what we create is a lightweight aggregate, a sand substitute. It's completely indistinguishable from our construction sand, which is also important from a marketing perspective. But it adds certain values, fire resistance, thermal resistance, acoustic resistance. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden we could say, okay, now as a building industry, we've got a rationale, we've got a financial rationale to absorb that waste stream. So it's no longer waste for us, it's zero waste. So we went about developing the technology and patenting the technology to be able to take all kinds of plastic, ocean plastic, river plastic, dirty plastic, we call it tragic. Yeah, we call it tragic plastic, post-industrial plastic, post-consumer plastic, every kind of plastic that you can imagine. We don't blend that plastic by plastic types, resin types 1 to 7. That's why we're called resin 8. We're the 8th resin. We commingle just about any mixture, but we look for a standard density is what we're after, and we create this absorptive product out of the entire waste stream in a zero waste format. So that being able to go into the plastic industry in zero waste was kind of new. And we were then picked up early on by the Alliance to End Plastic Waste as a potential option. So in about 2020, the Alliance to End Plastic Waste came in and provided some really decent debt funding to build a facility in Costa Rica, in the developing world, another one in York, Pennsylvania. And in the meantime, on our own steam, we put pilot facilities around the world. So now we have pilot facilities in Hong Kong, in South Africa, in Mexico, and now the United States here. And we're building now facilities in Chile, Australia, soon in India, England, and I think right now we're at the level of around 22 countries, and hopefully working with you guys throughout the Caribbean.
Exactly. I would like you to just kind of pivot for a moment and focus on your relationship with Costa Rica, because I feel like it's near to home for us. So that's one. So it's very relatable. But looking at your relationship with private sector, your relationship with government there, your relationship with development agencies within the Costa Rica use case, it feels to me like, the perfect combination for the UN Sustainable Development Goals number 17, right? Working with partnerships to have this kind of outcome. So if you could elaborate on it a bit, and this use case of Costa Rica and what's happening in Costa Rica with Pedregal.
Yeah, so early on we identified that we had to bring in individuals from all different sectors, from the resin sector, from the ocean research sector, from the industry, the construction industry sector. And we do that in every country we go to, we do that. And in Costa Rica is a great example. In Costa Rica, we worked very closely with the United Nations. In fact, about a month ago, it was announced that the United Nations will work with us to make Costa Rica the first plastic waste-free country in the world by 2030. We'll process 200,000 tons of plastic. In doing that, we have to work with the private sector. There's a large media company, television station that's involved in that process. All of the municipalities, it's a national program. All of the municipalities are involved in that process. We work closely globally with Habitat for Humanity. So the products that we build go into houses, into the social housing area. So yeah, we take a collaborative approach to this. In fact, there's no other way to do it. We're working now strongly with the banking sector and the investment sector. We have quite a bit of experience and people on the board in the investment area. This whole conversation about asset class investments, we take the approach more like developers. If you're a business that private equity is willing to invest in, you're probably on the right track. So one of the first things that we do is look to bring in private equity in the areas that we go to. We look to bring in the biggest builders, for instance, or the biggest waste management companies in as part of the equity. After that equity is in place and we get a plan that's when we go to the market and look for debt capital. And it's been a very successful model for us.
Excellent. Where does the Back That Build program, where does that fit into this landscape?
In the education part and recovery. So it's recover, enrich, appreciate, prosper. So the recovery element, we've taken a complete value proposition approach to what we do. We felt like we couldn't isolate ourselves just as a plastic technology. We also had to control our income, the incoming plastic. Otherwise, if we didn't have plastic, or we didn't have access to that plastic, our technology had no value. We also are still a large construction entity or associate with large construction industries around the world. So the Bag That Build played this role. We work closely with the Dow Reynolds Hefty Energy Bag. And it's a bag that goes into the household and the people are asked to, we work closely with Dow to put their plastic in that bag, and they have to identify what kind of plastic it is, because it'll only take certain kinds of plastic. We also identified that the consumers had lost faith in recycling. There was so much news in 2018 after China shut off the China sword. Most consumers went, why should I recycle any longer?
Yeah.
We've learned that this isn't working. So we felt that we had to create a consumer-facing program to build faith again within the industry. So the Bag That Builds was designed along with an educational program to go initially into schools and teach the children. They each get 2 bags. They take that bag home, fill it up with the plastic from the household, all plastic. Every kind of plastic goes into it. And from the company, there's a compromise. That's why it's called the Bag That Builds. Every bit of plastic that goes into that bag goes into building their communities. And in reality today, in the world, there's really only 2 other kinds of bags. The bag that's buried, landfill, and the bag that's burnt, incineration. And we don't think either one of those are a great option. So we went to the community, the consumer, and the consumer has embraced this project incredibly. For instance, just today, in South Africa, the World Rugby Association is building houses, and every rugby game in the rugby sevens is got the bag that builds, and every hotel in Cape Town today has got the bag that builds in it, and rugby players today are building houses in a subdivision. It's that kind of thing that motivates people.
Yeah.
The project started, the Bag That Builds started with a UN project in Samoa. That's where the Bag That Build was initiated. So in Samoa, it's going now into an entire educational program for the whole country.
So Donald, I know I could talk to you about this all day. You know this. I'm really excited about this project. I think, so we've touched on the business-led approach. We've touched on incorporation of the private sector, incorporation of NGOs and the community. And we've also talked about how you've approached the investment space. Most recently, you would have signed an agreement with UNDP Costa Rica for their plastic commitment. Could you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, it's an exciting program for us. After Nairobi this year in Nairobi, the news went out that essentially the UNDP said, listen, the world's got to get together and create private-public relationships. The very first one that was actually announced was our program with the Bag That Builds in Samoa. So we were happy about that. I think the Costa Rican UNDP got a little bit jealous, so they jumped on board. And we created here in Costa Rica, we created what's called Paisajes Sin Plásticos, which means landscapes without plastic. The idea was if we could pull the entire community together, the schools, sports events, the municipalities, the hotel, the tourism industry, we could pull everybody together under one program, we could capture all of this tragic plastic before it went into the ocean. And as part of that program, we're also putting in the Central Valley of Costa Rica, where San Jose is the main city, there's one river that runs out to the ocean. Now, San Jose, or Costa Rica's got a great deserved environmental reputation, but this one river is super problematic. There's a lot of plastic goes into the ocean. So under this program, 80% of the plastic that was currently going into the ocean will be caught by 4 river booms. All of that plastic, Keisha, you were on that river actually. All of that plastic that will be collected out of that river will then go into our facility and it'll then go into housing. So it's an exciting program. We plan on using Costa Rica as a worldwide example that it can be done. Yeah. And it will, by 2030, it appears it will process 200,000 tons of plastic. Our current facility, this is an interesting statistic, I think. Our current facility processes about 100 tons of plastic a day. We're just getting all the bugs worked out right now. But our joint venture partner, Pedregal, is such a large concrete products industry that it can utilize all of that. So just about all of the environmental plastic of one country can be utilized by one big player in the construction industry. So that relationship is what we're planning on utilizing Costa Rica as an example to the world for.
Yeah. Donald, I am really excited, and I know the rest of the team is too as well. We would have signed an MOU with your organization for scaling this intervention. In the Caribbean, we're looking at in the first instance at Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, and Barbados. And we're also in early stage discussions with CEMEX, which is not only just a cement manufacturer, but also a concrete manufacturer in some of these countries. So it's, and we're moving towards signing an MOU with them too as well. And then also looking at how we can leverage a similar type partnership that you have with Costa Rica, UNDP, with Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean UNDP here in the Caribbean. So it's really been excited talking to you. I wish we had more time to talk. I know we'll probably have some other opportunities to be able to talk about this project because we really want to have the opportunity to socialize the Caribbean to what is possible with this type of intervention. I want to thank you so much, Donald, for taking the time to talk to us today. Is there anything that you would like to say in terms of closing remarks?
Well, first off, I'd like to thank your your entity's interest in what we're doing. We're really excited about Caribbean. Costa Rica is a part of the region. We're expanding throughout the entire region. And, the message that we like to give everybody is we're a purpose-driven company. And we feel that we've been given an opportunity now to make a real significant change in this problem. And so we're taking it on. We're taking it on. Wherever there's plastic and there's concrete, we hope that you're going to find CRDC at some point in the future. We're taking the Starbucks approach to scalable growth. And so what can I say? Thank you so much, and we'll be in your region soon.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. So I'm going to hand over for Cheryl to close up. I know that many of you might have questions, and we'll seek to answer those questions offline. But let me just hand over to Cheryl to say to close up and say goodbye. Thank you, Donald.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keisha and Donald, and to all of our panelists this morning, as well as our audience for their engagement and participation during the session. It's been really informative, and I think we've really been able to hone in on the ways that we can work going forward to build out sustainable blue economy solutions and how we can interact with our investors, financial partners, and project developers to assist us with developing those solutions and implementing in a meaningful way going forward. We've addressed most of the questions that were placed in the Q&A box throughout the session. There's just one open question at this point in time, and we'll address that if necessary offline. Thank you so much to everyone. We look forward to having you at future events. Please follow us on our social media platforms, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And you will be able to view this session again when we post the video through those respective media. Thank you and have a wonderful day to everybody.